What if I told you that the secret to understanding whether a country is thriving, or maybe on the brink of real social collapse, isn't actually about its GDP? It's not just about how much money it makes or how big the economic pie is. It's entirely about how that pie is sliced. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving deep into the Great Divide. We're going to look at exactly how wealth is distributed, and more importantly, how economists manage to take a totally abstract, emotional concept like unfairness and turn it into hard, cold data.
So if we want to figure out if a society is really working for its people, we need a standardized metric, right? We need a way to actually measure this stuff. Enter the Gini Index, or you might hear it called the Gini coefficient. It was invented way back in 1912 by an Italian statistician named Corrado Gini. And honestly, it is the most famous, but probably the most widely misunderstood tool we have to measure global income and wealth inequality. Let's break down exactly how it works.
Okay, to baseline the math here, we have to start with the extreme ends of the spectrum. Imagine a purely theoretical utopia. Picture a country with exactly 100 people, and let's say they have 100 pizzas. In this perfect world, every single person gets exactly one pizza. No more, no less. In economics, this perfectly even distribution of income is our absolute zero bound. It gives us a Gini index of exactly zero, perfect equality.
Now, let's flip that to the absolute, terrifying opposite extreme. Imagine one person in that society, let's call him the CEO of pizzas, decides to take all 100 pizzas for himself, and the other 99 people get absolutely nothing. Zero. On the Gini Index, this incredibly bleak scenario where a single individual holds 100% of the wealth is represented by the number 1. And the reality is, every single nation on Earth falls somewhere on this scale, right between 0 and 1.
To actually visualize where a country sits on this scale, economists use something called the Lorenz Curve, which was developed by Max Lorenz. Picture a straight diagonal line moving up and to the right. That straight line is the line of equality. It shows what would happen if 20% of the population earned 20% of the income, 40% earned 40%, and so on. But, well, in the real world, the actual distribution always bows downward, sagging away from that perfect ideal. That bowing line, that is our Lorenz curve.
Now that bow in the curve is where the magic, or the math rather, actually happens. It creates two distinct zones on our graph. Let's call the space trap between perfect equality and reality Area A. Then Area B is simply everything else completely under the curve. The wider the gap between perfect equality and the real world, the larger Area A becomes. And, you guessed it, the larger Area A is, the higher the resulting Gini index.
The actual formula for this is surprisingly elegant. The Gini coefficient is really just the ratio of that inequality gap, so Area A, divided by the total area under the equality line, which would be A plus B. That's it. It's just a direct, beautiful mathematical reflection of exactly how far society deviates from perfect equality.
So if we bring the math back to those conceptual extremes we talked about earlier, a Gini of 0 means the Lorenz curve perfectly hugs the line of equality. There's literally 0 Area A. But a Gini of 1? The curve forms this severe, harsh 90-degree angle. It just flatlines at 0 income for everyone until the very, very last person, who suddenly holds all the wealth.
But hey, let's step out of theory and bring this into the real world. You are never going to find a 0 or a 1 in real life. If we look at World Bank data, countries almost always fall somewhere between 0.2 and 0.6. On the highly equal side of things, we have countries like Slovakia sitting at an incredibly low 0.24. On the flip side, when we look at the extreme high end of global inequality, we see nations like South Africa, which has recorded a Gini score as staggering as 0.63.
Here's the thing, though. A Gini score isn't a fixed destiny. It shifts, sometimes dramatically, over time within a single country. Take the United States, for example. Back in 1970, the U.S. Gini index sat at a relatively modest 0.39. But thanks to things like globalization and huge labor market shifts, that number has just steadily climbed, hitting 0.49 by 2024. That is a massive, fundamental, structural shift in how the nation's wealth is distributed.
So how on earth do societies manage this? Well, mostly through government intervention, specifically taxes and social transfers. South Africa is actually a fascinating example here. Before taxes, their market income Gini is phenomenally high, estimated at around 0.70. But once you factor in social assistance programs and progressive income taxes, that number absolutely plummets down to 0.47. The whole tax and transfer system actively grabs that Lorenz curve and pulls it closer to the line of equality.
Now, as incredible as this mathematical tool is, I have to be honest with you, it has some serious blind spots. As the researcher Lars Osberg points out, focusing solely on the Gini Index can thus obscure perceptions. Which naturally leads us to a really critical question. Is it possible for two radically different societies with completely different lived realities to share the exact same Gini score?
To answer that, Osberg created this brilliant thought experiment. He imagined a fictional society called Adenac, and he compared two distinct versions of it. In the first, Adenac 80, the bottom 80% of the population, shares 40% of the total income. Not great, but watch this. In the second, Adenac 99, society is completely hollowed out. 99% of the people are poor, and just 1% are incredibly, fabulously rich. Two totally different worlds, right?
Well, here is the grand illusion. Mathematically, both of those radically different societies share an identical Gini score of 0.4. Their day-to-day realities are miles apart. I mean, the rich-to-poor income ratio varies by a factor of 12, and the top 1%'s income share varies by over 16 times. Yet, on paper, they score exactly the same. A single summary number like the Gini just can't tell you exactly who is hoarding the wealth at the very top or who is struggling at the very bottom.
And honestly, there are other vital flaws we need to keep in mind. The Gini Index measures relative wealth, not absolute poverty. Let that sink in. A country could have a wonderfully low Gini score simply because everyone in it is equally destitute. It also really struggles with demographic shifts. Think about it. An aging population with a lot of retirees is naturally going to look more unequal on paper because retirees generally have lower current incomes. Plus, different countries use totally different household survey methods, which makes doing direct apples-to-apples global comparisons pretty tricky.
Because of all these limitations, economists don't just rely on the Gini Index. It's just one piece of the puzzle. They actually have a whole dashboard of metrics at their disposal. For instance, there's the Thale Index, which is fantastic for breaking down inequality between different subgroups. You've got the mean log deviation, or MLD, which is highly sensitive to changes way down at the very bottom of the income ladder. And there's the Atkinson Index, which actually lets researchers factor in a society's specific aversion to inequality.
So, what does this all mean for us? Ultimately, I like to think of the Gini Index as a warning light on the dashboard of a nation. It's this beautiful mathematical tool that captures the broad strokes of a country's social structure. It reminds us that for an economy to remain stable and healthy, it's really not enough for the total GDP to just grow and grow. The wealth actually has to circulate. When that warning light starts flashing red, it is a clear sign that the social contract might be fraying.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to end this explainer on. We almost always assume that equality is the ultimate goal, but is a low Gini index always a sign of a healthy society? If an economy shrinks to the point where everyone is just equally poor, the math is going to look absolutely perfect, but the reality for the people living there will be grim. It really makes you wonder, what is the ideal balance between rewarding innovation and ensuring that absolutely no one gets left behind? That, my friends, is the real equation we're all trying to solve.